Okay, so from roadmap to reality, I think I've been talking to Tezos X a bunch at TezDev, and I think this time is going to be a bit different because we have a lot of progress on that roadmap. So I'm excited to talk about it. And we're going to start by walking back a little bit. So this is a graphic that was published last year that presents a proposed roadmap for Tezos X. And you can see it has different tracks. There's a layer 1 track, the layer 2 track, and then a DAL, which is its own thing, and then different things that have happened and are, and that we plan on make happening. So let's go a little bit through it. Let's see what we've done here. So what is Tezos X, first of all? Well, Tezos X is built to offer better composability. So, when people think about layer 2s today, they think a lot about the mess that you can see on Ethereum, where we have hundreds of layer 2s. They don't really interact very well with each other. There's tons of fragmentation. It's not a good user experience. So we don't want that on Tezos X. Tezos X should have composability. All the applications should still be able to talk to each other. Interoperability, you should be able to write applications in any programming language you want to use. If you want to use JavaScript, if you want to use Python, if you want to use Michelson, if you want to use Solidity, all of that should be possible. And all these applications should be able to talk to each other. And performance, we've demonstrated 2 TezDevs ago, 1 million transactions per second on Tezos mainnet using 1,000 parallel rollups. And so here what we'd like to do is not target 1 million TPS across 1,000 rollup, but across a single one. And the reason for 1 million is that it's a nice round number, and for all intents and purposes, it seems to be enough for a while. So it's the next generation of production design. It's modular and integrated. So we have the modularity that comes with having a layer 2. We have the modularity that comes with having a data availability layer, but none of the fragmentation. And it provides a scalable backend for a wide range of applications. So the thing that I think is always a bit surprising to people is mostly when people think rollups, they think about horizontal scaling. Isn't the point of rollups that you can have loads in parallel? And there's been this opposition that people have said between monolithic scaling, like Solana is doing. It's like, oh no, let's just have one big monolith. You see it in Solana, you see it in Monad, you see it in a bunch of others trying this approach. And then you have people saying, no, we should be decentralized, and then we should have all these rollups in parallel. The reality is that the best way to scale vertically while staying decentralized is to scale vertically via a rollup. And that's true for boring or not boring, depending on the audience technical reasons. But if you really, really want to scale vertically, you are much better off doing it on a rollup than you are doing it on an L1. The main reason is that L1s have honest majority assumption. You need lots of people doing all the work, whereas rollups have a single honest party assumption. What is a canonical rollup? So one component of Tezos X is that it's not just a rollup. It's meant to be a canonical rollup. So there's a couple aspects that make this canonical. First, it's enshrined. Enshrined means that it's not just a smart contract that someone went and built on top of the network. They say, oh, I have this nice smart contract. By the way, these smart contracts can power this entire rollup. No, it's enshrined. It's special. It's an extension of the protocol. It extends the functionality. It extends the scalability of the protocol. It's non-custodial. Almost every single L2 you see out there, not Etherlink, but almost every single L2 you see out there is custodial. What does it mean to be custodial? It means someone has the keys. Someone can actually take control of it. And in Ethereum land, they will say, oh, wait a second. No, it's not custodial. It's decentralized level 27, which means that it's only when there's a serious bug that they're supposed to use the key. Well, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they have a written or unwritten policies that, Pinky swears they will only use the key if there's a big bug. At the end of the day, someone has the keys to your assets. Now, a fair question would be, say, well, how is it different from proof of stake? In proof of stake, maybe a lot of stakers together have the keys to your assets. But that is not true, because what defends L1s, like proof of stake, or even proof of work, from a lot of these attacks is the possibility of forking. What happens when you have, let's say, half of the stake or 1/3 plus of the stake decides to behave maliciously? What can they do to the blockchain? Can they actually take over your assets? Well, no. What they can do is they cannot commit safety faults. What they can do is they can do double spends, or they can stop the chain more realistically. And when that happens, what you do is that you may have to fork, but you fork and then a new version of the chain slashes them, and then you just carry on. So really, proof-of-stake validators do not control your assets. And the same thing is not true in the rollups that you see today on Ethereum. You do have people with keys, and those keys can take your assets. And the big difference is that if tomorrow the Security Council of Arbitrum decides to take away your assets, or Coinbase decides to take away your assets on Base, because they absolutely have this right. Coinbase has just as much power on Base as it has on a Coinbase order book. There is no difference. If they decide to do that, the Ethereum chain will not fork to protect it, because it is not a part of the Ethereum chain. It's an application that runs on the Ethereum chain. The enshrined monolith, a canonical rollup, is a part of Tezos. It's an integral part of Tezos. The Tezos protocol forks to protect itself. It will absolutely fork to protect a canonical rollup. So it's part of a social contract that goes around it. It's aligned in terms of, technical roadmap, in terms of culture, in terms of economics. It uses the same token. It doesn't use another token in order to please a venture capitalist that's funded the venture. It's protected by ZL1. It's governed by ZL1. So there's a massive difference between a canonical rollup, one that's an extension of the network, and some venture that people build as a smart contract on Ethereum, where they raise a bunch of VC money. It's not the same thing. One is a technical feature, the other one is more of a business venture. So let's look a little bit at what's been done. Well, one of the first things was getting Tenderbake. We went from fairly slow finality to fairly fast finality, and one key to that was to have Tenderbake. Tenderbake gave us finality in 2 blocks, and the main benefit we got out of it, compared to the previous consensus algorithm, is pseudo-synchronous safety. And it's a boring technical thing, but when you have the type of consensus you have in Bitcoin, or your type of consensus you had on Tezos before Tenderbake, you essentially have to guess what the network latency is, and if you guess wrong, you're not safe. Whereas with a protocol like Tenderbake, if you guess wrong, then the network will be a bit slower than it should otherwise be, but you will not lose your safety property. So because you're not forced to make very conservative assumption about network latency, you can actually lower the network latency. So the main benefit is not so much the finality, it's the ability to really lower your network latency. And as it turned out, that was important. So that was done a while back. That was done in Ithaca, April 2022. 8-second block time. So again, lowering the block time from 60 seconds to something like 8 seconds, we needed to have a semi-synchronous safe algorithm for that. And that's been achieved recently in Quebec in January 2025, just a few months ago. So yeah, if you look at launch, I think we recommended 60. I think it was a little less. It says 360 seconds. I think we actually recommended way more than that. I think at one point it was recommended to wait 60 blocks of 1 minute each. That was just like the very, very release, when it was still a beta net. And yeah, it's gone down consistently. So now we're at 16 seconds, and I think it's going to keep going down, probably around the 10-second or 8-second mark. What else have we done? Adaptive issuance. So adaptive issuance touches on the economics of staking. And it was important because when you are in a layer 2, you cannot really stake, right? You have to stake on the layer 1. The layer 2 has its own logic, and it cannot be tracked by the layer 1. And the problem is, like on Tezos, you had this model where, well, you can delegate. It costs you nothing. There's no reason not to delegate. And then once you delegate, you're going to, there's inflation on a network, but you're getting some of it back through delegation. It's not very tax efficient because, the taxman doesn't treat this as a neutral operation, even though it should. And also, it means that you're going to have a trade-off between having your assets on L1 or assets on L2. So we wanted to remove that. We wanted to net out. Instead of saying like, oh, the network puts out X% and then you're getting X% back. Historically, around 5% inflation is 6% back. The idea is to say the issuance should be as low as it takes in order to have enough staked. And that's, in progress. But adaptive issuance itself was adopted in Paris in June 2024. So the goal again is to say you have no opportunity cost between using your Tez on L1 or using your Tez in a rollup. So what have we done with this? So staking started out around like 9-10% of the network, went down to about 8%. And so now we're around 25% of staking. So we have way more coins which are staked. Stake means that they are at stake. They could be slashed. Slashing events are very rare. Even now, slashing is a lot less punitive. So slashing is not punitive unless you have evidence that there was lots of collusion. But that has dramatically improved the security of the economic security of the protocol to have way more at stake. And issuance went up for a while after Paris because there was a period of time where people had to adapt, so it was incentivizing people to stake. And so now is on track to be lower than it's ever been. It's still 4%, which is high. We only have 25% stakes. The goal is to get closer to 50%. It's still quite attractive to stake because stakers get about 10.5% currently compared to 3% for delegation. The word hasn't fully gotten through yet. But I think overall we're on a good trend. Data availability layer, that one is a bit more recent. And it's been described earlier as a rollup booster, and that's essentially what it does. It lets your rollup handle way more transaction. And that was activated in Paris, June 2024. But that's when it got into the protocol, and more recently it's become active with 85% of the Baker now supporting the DAO. So we're starting out very slow, 500 kilobytes per second, achieved in May 2025, but it has the capacity of growing to 10 megabytes per second and more. Data availability sampling, that's coming later. So again, this is a technical distinction. Right now, you are dependent on non-collusion between bakers for the safety of the DAO. But if you want even more safety, you could run a node that connects to the network and then kind of like samples and say, oh, you said this data is available. Show me this piece, show me this piece, show me this piece. And by quizzing random pieces of the data, you can give yourself very strong statistical certainty that the network is, that the data that is being claimed to be available is indeed available. This is a good to have, I think, especially if you're a purist in terms of like the security, but for our scaling at the moment, it's not strictly necessary. That's coming 2026. Smart rollups. So what are smart rollups? Well, they enable resource-intensive processing of transactions to happen on powerful computers, while integrity and security is guaranteed by a decentralized layer 1. That's the magic. That's how you scale, and that's why if you want to scale vertically, you're better off doing it with a rollup, because essentially all you need is one honest person with a big computer. Now, ideally, you have more than one honest person. You have some redundancy. You have a few honest people with a big computer. But you just need one. And more importantly, you don't need a majority. So if you have 10 bad people with 10 bad computer and one good person with one good computer, that's enough. Your rollup is going to be secure. That is a much better security assumption than consensus, where you need the majority to be honest. So those were introduced with the Mumbai upgrade in March 2023. Again, a key part to the scaling roadmap. Now, that was abstract. We had the possibility of a rollup, but not an actual rollup. And that came with Etherlink, which is the first actual rollup, and a EVM compatibility layer for Tezos. It's enshrined within the layer 1, and it gives a low latency EVM compatible environment that launched in May 2024. So what is Etherlink exactly? So the tagline is that it's fast, fair, and nearly free. So it came out of beta in 2025. It's already had 4 successful protocol upgrades. It's governed by the Tezos Baker on the Tezos chain. Recently, we've introduced fast withdrawals. So one of the downside of optimistic rollup is that communication between the rollup and the layer 1 is subject to a long window because you want to give people the chance to contest any bad transition. So that made withdrawals last 14 days. So now they're down to 60 seconds if you're willing to pay a small fee. And that fee essentially is paid to someone who's monitoring both chain, is convinced that, yes, I've actually validated the chain. I know that this transition is valid. And so I'm happy to lend you some funds for 14 days so that you can get your withdrawal right away. There's currently a proposal that will double the speed limit because it was set fairly conservatively. Now, doubling it is, as Thomas said earlier, is not where we want to be. We want to be much beyond that. But that will be a first step, and a new governance model to improve the voting UX and have faster iteration. So currently up for a vote. It's an enshrined rollup governed by Baker, permissionless bridging. That's one of the things that rollups achieve. If you had a rollup without bridging that existed a long time ago, that was called things like Mastercoin, for example, on Bitcoin. And the problem is that, well, you can't really use your underlying blockchain with them. So what rollups establish essentially is a real bridge. And most bridge which build themselves as permissionless or decentralized or trustless are not. A lot of, most bridging is a multi-sig. This is not the case for optimistic rollups. And of course, Tez is a native token. It has a growing DeFi ecosystem. We see the launch of Uranium with the X208 token. Hanji, which is an order book DEX. That's an innovative way of doing a DEX. And it's a lot, I would say, because we have this lower latency and more computing power, you can have, I would say, more natural primitives for markets than the ones developed by Uniswap. I think Uniswap was interesting early on because it really fitted into an environment where gas was very limited, where transactions were very expensive. If transactions are very cheap and very fast, order books dominate. X, which is a more traditional one. Superland, a platform for lending and borrowing, which can get the best rate out there and works nice in a multi-chain environment. Oku, which is a deployment of Uniswap v3. Jumper, I think Jumper is super important because at the end of the day, a lot of users are not necessarily users of chains. They're users of wallets. They're users of front ends. So Jumper is a front end that lets you essentially say, I have this token here. I want that token here. Figure it out. And it will do that. And now it will figure it out using Etherlink. We have some exciting assets from Midas. You had a presentation earlier, some yield tokens there, Spyco as well, and more coming. So nice growing ecosystem on Etherlink. And having this EVM compatibility has made it a lot easier to get some of these external partners to deploy on a chain. So Etherlink DeFi is ramping up. Part of it has coincided with the launch of Apple Farm in March. And so now we're nearing 50 million USD in TVL on a chain, but it's just getting started. So Etherlink plus DAO is the next step. The idea is, and again, there was Thomas touched about this on his talk, which is let's put the transactions from Etherlink on the DAO so that we can get even more throughput. That was achieved in the Genesis upgrade from May 2025. It hasn't been rolled out yet in the Etherlink sequencer, but it's coming. All right, so Tezos X, let me go back a little bit to Tezos X. It's emerging because I've talked about different technologies. I've talked about the DAO. I've talked about the L1. I've talked about Etherlink. And when taken all together, they essentially form an early version of Tezos X. So we have L1 providing the security, DAO providing the bandwidth, and Etherlink is the first runtime. There are many runtimes to come. And all of that is already available and already there on mainnet. Thank you. So what's next? Well, scalability, right? Right now, Etherlink, it does okay in terms of transaction per second. It does more than enough for usage and honestly for most chains usage. But we want to go better than that. So native code execution, parallelization, storage optimization. There's a lot of vertical scalability we can squeeze out of Etherlink. It's just not been a focus for the moment. It needed to be good enough. It wasn't trying to be competitive in this area. So that's an immediate focus. Perhaps something we didn't see as critical early on, but it's like now being reprioritized to give a lot of scaling to Etherlink. So again, coming this year in 2025, I would say large improvements to the capacity and the bandwidth of Etherlink. So going to about 10,000 TPS. I think we're in 100 to 200 TPS now, which is like more than enough for traffic. But with everyone ramping up TPS, you don't want to go into a piecing contest with everyone by saying like how many thousands of transactions per second you're doing when the median blockchain doesn't do that many transactions per second in the aggregates. But you still want to have something that's decent and defendable. And 10,000 is puts us in the top. The RISC-V engine, super important, boring and technical. When Etherlink was developed, initially it was developed for WASM, for interesting but arcane technical reasons. It turns out that RISC-V is a better platform to do that. You've had a great presentation by Ole on RISC-V. But the next generation of smart rollup is going to run on RISC-V. It makes it a lot easier also to develop kernels for smart rollups. And so there's going to be a switch of Etherlink to the RISC-V engine, and also to this new runtime REVM. That's a lot of work that's been ongoing on the RISC-V front. So again, as Oli mentioned, we started out with a 4000x slowdown compared to native execution. That's been improved massively. The goal is to get within a factor 10. And if you get to 3, now you're very, very competitive, even with WASM. And I think that's quite doable. So ongoing work. The nice thing once you have RISC-V is that it's a great compilation target. You can't compile everything to WASM. There's a lot of complexity. If you want to run JavaScript, for example, JavaScript engines, like modern JavaScript engine, they generate code on the fly and they execute it. And the security model of WASM doesn't actually let you do that. So if you want to be very free and if you want to use anything you want, RISC-V is a place to do it. But that means that we need to retrofit some stuff. Coming in 2025. Tezlink. Tezlink is an environment you probably all know and love. It's a Michelson-compatible execution environment. So it's the same environment that we have on Tezos L1, but this time with the improved latency and performance of a rollup. And available, of course, for all of Tezos original builders, but also new builders. I want to point out that just because we're doing EVM compatibility, doesn't mean that Michelson isn't a much better language. Like, there's a lot of design and thought that went into Michelson and that went into the Tezos environment and Tezos transaction. The more I've delved into Etherlink, the more I've been horrified with the Ethereum ecosystem, to be honest. I'm not saying this for rah-rah, but Wallet Connect, still not decentralized, still doesn't work. We've had our issues with Beacon, but that works much better. And wallets just not connecting. It's a bit of a mess. And they just introduced batch transactions. We had a batch transaction in 2018. Anyways, this is a much better environment. But at the end of the day, what matters, in the market is a combination of meeting what people want and expect for a variety of reasons and having a really good product. And, having the EVM lets us get a lot of compatibility with people who are expecting EVM, and it's mediocre, but it is what people want, and it gives us compatibility, and that's super important. You're talking to a custodian, for example, and you say, oh, can you support our assets? Can you support this chain? And they say, well, are you EVM? Because they've had to support EVM, and so it's just one config line change. If you are a bit of an idiosyncratic stack, it's a much longer conversation. And that's the nice part about Tezlink. It's not in another rollup. It runs in the same environment as Etherlink, and so they are processed together, which means instant asset transfers and communication between those two. So it's not like two rollups that have to wait 2 weeks to communicate via the layer 1. They are two environments within one rollup. And all the applications, of course, that have run on Tezos L1 can run on Tezlink, and that's coming 2026. This is a little example. You see, we already have an explorer running on Tezlink, still work in progress, but it's not at the ID stage. It's at the stage where we're running explorers. And yeah, it will be compatible with existing L1 tools, and of course interoperable with Etherlink and later Justice when it comes out. What is Justice? Just gave a talk about Justice at ETC a few days ago. What's the talk? Great presentation. I don't know. I liked it. But it's an execution environment and a big development of smart contracts in JavaScript. So you know what I said about how Michelson is better than EVM, but a lot of people expect the EVM. Well, the same is very true for JavaScript. JavaScript is not a good language. However, it is a language of the web. And, Java tried to be the language of the web, but their applets took forever to launch, and it was bad licensing from Sun. And so at the end of the day, JavaScript took the web market. People started building for the web because they could deploy everywhere. And it became a bit of a stone soup situation where people improved the tooling around JavaScript so much that despite the inherent flaws of the language, it has a wealth of libraries. And, when looking at JavaScript not as a programming language, but as an ecosystem. As an ecosystem, it's fantastic. And so it's an execution environment enabling development of smart contracts in JavaScript, which is, not one of the most popular programming. It's the most popular programming languages by almost any metric you can think about. One argument that I like is LLMs speak it very well as a result. A lot more code is being generated by large language models. They are very polyglot. If you can even ask a large language model to write Michelson, it will do it for you. However, that LLM has seen million times more lines of code in JavaScript than it has in Michelson, and as a result, it is more fluent. So it is nice to have programming languages in which AIs are going to be very, very fluent in. That includes JavaScript, Python, C++. Yeah, it's an L2 on smart rollup. People have done JavaScript on blockchains before. On a more ridiculous side, you had like stuff like RISC, where you had to have a governance proposal for each new smart contract that you wanted, because they didn't really have a gas model. So that's how they could, the only way they could accept it. To more earnest efforts on Near, to actually really interesting ideas on Agoric, but no one's really done like the full JavaScript thing, like essentially allowing developers to sync like a web developer, just using all the tools, all the stacks that you're familiar with, HTTP style calls, like using Node.js, using all these libraries, and that's what we're trying to do with Justice. It also comes with batteries included. So the idea is to really make it so that the developer doesn't have to think about anything. We don't want to say like, oh wait, that's just a programming language. Of course you can't do this. Of course you can't do that. So bring enshrine Oracle's services. The easiest like sweet spot way of doing this is trusted execution environment, so that when your developer comes in and says, look, I want my smart contract to fetch a web page. You don't tell them like, silly you, don't you know that smart contracts cannot fetch web pages? You need an Oracle for that. No. We don't want to have this conversation with them. We want to be maximally developer friendly. So we tell them, of course, you just do an HTTP request. It works out of the box. And then you just call the Oracle. And that's the spirit. It's just, we want to make it so that people do not have to think about these things. It's handled for them. Nice account abstraction, probably also a nice way to support out of the box. Cross-in bridging, you don't want to think about this. So it comes out of the box, and you can do all of this. In a cross-in bridging side, one thing I'm interested in as well is what I would call reverse chain abstraction. So some people have been doing chain abstraction, which is to say like, only use our blockchain, and it will let you use every other blockchain via our blockchain. Reverse chain abstraction does, goes to the developer and say, developer, deploy your contract on our blockchain, and users on every other blockchain will be able to use it, which I think is more interesting, because a lot of developers today choose platforms not because of their technical merits, but because of the distribution that comes with them. So if you can tell them, look, we have a platform that has technical merits, but if you deploy on this platform, you're getting distribution on Ethereum, you're getting distribution on Solana, you're getting distribution on Tezos, you're getting distribution everywhere. I think that's quite compelling. So coming Q1 of 2026, a launch on mainnet, developer portal, sponsor transaction, wire connect integration, trade out, tezos.com/justice. What else do we have? BLS signature, that's coming in the next proposal. It's a bit technical, but mostly the main point is we want all bakers to sign all blocks. And for that, it's important to aggregate the signatures. Why? Well, currently, 900 megabytes, almost a gigabyte a day, is produced just for signature on the Tezos blockchain. So if you have a Tezos node, it's storing a gigabyte every day just for signature. If we aggregate the signatures, it falls down to 14 megabytes per day. So that's much, much better. It also means faster block application, which reduces latency. And because everyone can sign, it gives us better security for both L1 and the DAO. The plan is to have a bit of a transition phase, because a lot of people have infrastructure that doesn't support BLS. So the idea is that we allow everyone to use TZ4, and then once we have about 50% that use TZ4, we can switch to only aggregated attestation with every baker attesting. So the idea is like, once you have 50%, you can still do the other transaction, but we move to the state where we say like, okay, now everyone can sign. And then later on, when you have really a vast majority just using TZ4, you can say, all right, now now you have to use TZ4. Canonical rollup, we've talked about what that is, and the idea is let's bring all of that together. We want to have atomic transaction across smart contracts, so it's not just bridging assets, but all these contracts can talk to each other. So you can have a JavaScript contract called an EVM contract, called a Michelson contract, all different programming languages, sub-second latency, the ultimate development environment for a Web3 developer. How does this work? Well, initially, the idea is you have these three things, so we start out with Tezlink, Justice, Etherlink. They are basically bridged synchronously, so not necessarily atomic calls between contracts, but at least asset transfer. Of course, all of that settles on Tezos L1. And the nice thing with having Etherlink is that it gives us this EVM compatibility layer. So like, let's say you want to launch a token, and you want to launch a token on Justice. Well, because it synchronously bridges to Etherlink, it's very easy for it to appear as an Etherlink token to any exchange that you might want to list on, or to any custodian, or to the layer 0 bridge. So essentially, the Etherlink EVM compatibility layer buys us this kind of like compatibility with a lot of the multi-chain infrastructure that exists out there, while still allowing within Tezos X this composability with this other execution environment. So what's coming in 2026? So again, Etherlink providing the EVM compatibility, Tezlink offering the L2 experience for all the Tezos L1 dApps, Justice for something a bit out there and really like giving a full JavaScript web developer experience. And of course, all that processing transaction in a single ledger as a canonical rollup. So Tezos X is already a bit of a reality, but I think it will be even more patent in 2026. All right, so in conclusion, Tezos is expanding rapidly. So engineering teams have been delivering on this roadmap. We've seen like a lot of things have been checked out. The vision and design have been stable since 2023. I would say the general idea of scaling via rollups and adaptability sampling has been stable since 2021. The exact implementation, like a lot of the implementation details and structure has come together in 2023. And the idea is that the L2 is extending L1. So you can think of Tezos X as Tezos extended, and all of these rollups as network extensions. Some lessons are on the way. We've had to adjust some things in the roadmap. Etherlink TPS has become a higher priority near term than MEV protection, which was one of the initial goal. It's still on the roadmap, but TPS more important. Data availability sampling is going to take a bit longer, but we have the data availability layer. There was an idea at first of like automatically upgrading all of the L1 dApps to Tezlink. Turns out that it's not practical, creates too much friction, and in practice, most dApps that want to move actually have the possibility of doing it manually. And then BLS, it became clear that BLS was necessary, again, for arcane technical reasons that have to do with how the DAL is sharded, and latency. All right. Beyond the roadmap, thank you.